Good afternoon. Welcome to my workshop on shaping linguistic mediation skills through online interaction. My name is Agnieszka Gadomska and I'm assistant professor in the Department of English at SWPS, University of Social Sciences and Humanities in Warsaw. Mediation has become a buzzword among educators, especially since 2018, when the Council of Europe published CFR companion volume with the new descriptors. This process ended a long work on calibrating, validating, and designing new descriptors, particularly these for mediation and online interaction. Today's presentation will consist of two parts. In the first part, we are going to discuss the theoretical background of mediation. We'll look at mediation from a variety of perspectives in order to understand its complex meaning. In the second part of today's presentation, I will introduce a selection of activities for teaching mediation skills via online interaction. Mediation is an abstract word and complex term. It applies both to relationships and communication, spanning from home environment through education to the workplace. It involves lay people and professionals. It may serve to solve the conflict, to enable communication, to solve misunderstandings and miscommunication. It requires, on the one hand, a variety of strategies and skills, but at the same time, just goodwill and engagement. This is Wisława Szymborska's poem, and I would like this fragment to serve as inspiration for today's workshop. With smiles and kisses, we prefer to seek accord beneath our star. Although we are different, we concur, just as two drops of water are. There are no two identical people on the planet. Therefore, when two individuals meet, they are likely to disagree, to differ in the way how they see and interpret the world. Today, I have invited three distinguished guests from my university who are going to tell us more about mediation and the application of mediation in different spheres of life. Since the origins of the term date back to ancient times and Roman law, let's begin with the legal understanding of the term. And our first guest speaker, Dr. Paulina Tomaszewska, lawyer in the Supreme Chamber of Physicians and Dentists in Poland.
What is mediation to a lawyer? Mediation is a voluntary process in which a neutral third party, the mediator, supports the negotiation process between the parties in dispute, prompting them to find a satisfactory solution by analyzing their options and formulating an agreement that satisfies their needs. Mediation makes it possible not only to resolve a conflict, but also to improve the relationship of the parties involved for the future, changing the way they think about a conflict. The term mediation comes from the Latin word mediatio and means agency. The word medius, on the other hand, means someone in the middle, a mediator. Mediation is the primary and best known alternative dispute resolution. It can be said that mediation is as old as the world. With the appearance of the first people in the world, the first conflicts appeared. In every mediation, an impartial third person, a mediator, who always participates in mediation, creates a neutral platform for the parties to communicate, talk, and discuss a possible way to end a dispute, which often makes it possible to avoid many years of court proceedings. As practice shows, in many cases, the source of conflict is the lack of communication. In this aspect, legal mediation relates to linguistic mediation. Creating a field for conversation, improving communication by the mediator during mediation allows the parties to understand what has really happened, especially if there is a misunderstanding on the language level. Does it sound abstract? Let's look at the example. In medical disputes between a doctor and a patient, it can happen that the source of conflict lies in the lack of communication. The patient may not understand the language of the doctor, who uses specialized language, who speaks very fast, often in an incomprehensible manner. The context is also important. Imagine a short conversation under stressful circumstances in a hospital. This sometimes leads to a conflict. Mediation allows the decoding of difficult language, calming the conversation, exchanging insights. It often turns out that after professional mediation, when the patient understands what the doctor's intention was, and the doctor talks about his intentions in a proper and calm way, the conflict ceases to exist. There was only miscommunication. Research shows that mediation has very good results. For example, in about 70% of cases involving professional liability of doctors and dentists, a settlement is reached. Already in the 19th century, Abraham Lincoln rightly noted that a dispute is a problem to be solved, not a battle to be won. Mediation is the way that allows a dispute to be resolved. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tomaszewska, for explaining to us the historical background of the meaning and role of mediation in resolving conflicts, decoding the meaning, and enabling communication. Dr. Tomaszewska has rightly observed that there are some overlapping areas with linguistics and linguistic aspects of mediation, such as agency and the field for conversation. So now let's look at the participants of this conversation, that is the 21st century learners and teachers. Let's look how CFR descriptors can be used to profile the 21st century learner, with a particular focus on his or her mediation skills and online interaction skills. CFR provides the tools for learning, teaching and assessment, in that order, in the form of illustrative descriptors that profile a foreign language learner user in the terms of his overall language proficiency, aspects of competence, as well as communicative activities. The levels of linguistic competence now range from pre-A1, with A1 being the beginner, to C2 near native speaker proficiency, with the trend towards more integrated skills approach and authentic language use. This will be very important for the second part of our conversation, when we will focus on authorial materials. Now, we have also observed a shift in the role of the language user from just a learner or speaker to the 21st century social agent. According to Brian North, learners should be involved in negotiation of meaning and co-construction of meaning by using purposeful collaborative tasks whose primary focus is not the language. Teachers, on the other hand, should treat learners as social agents, involving them in the learning process, recognizing the social nature of language learning. Teachers should include pluricultural and plurilingual competences. Let me provide another short quote by the author Diana Whitney, who said, "Meaning is made in conversation, reality is created in communication, and knowledge is generated through social interaction. Language is the vehicle through which we create our understanding of the world." Let me now invite the second distinguished guest from my university, Dr. Max Bielecki, assistant professor from the Faculty of Psychology. In psychology, mediation can be utilized in a variety of contexts. Let's see if we see some connections to mediation in didactics.
Mediation, as it's understood in statistical and methodological literature, is an approach or method that allows us to identify and explain mechanisms that underlie certain relationships. It sounds a bit abstract, so let's use an example. We all know that using active learning methods in class leads to improved learning outcomes. And we might ask ourselves why that is the case. Maybe that relationship might be explained by a higher student engagement. So that would mean that if we use active learning methods, students spend more time learning, and that leads to better grades. In such a case, we would call student engagement a mediator, an intervening variable that explains the relationship of the two studied phenomena. So I guess that the fact that mediating variables are called also intermediary variables or intervening variables, that fits in quite nicely into the topic of today's session. So I hope you'll find that example somehow useful. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really very useful. And it seems that the word engagement is another key word of today's workshop. Now, linguistic mediation skills via online or offline interaction based on solid language skills are essential not only in professional contexts, but also in our everyday private situations. Therefore, interdisciplinary, CLIL, or key competences-based approach to teaching English as a foreign language with the focus on mastering mediation skills fosters communication in the foreign language in a variety of natural and practical contexts. In effect, engaging learners in the long and demanding process of acquiring not only language skills, but also social and intercultural competence. Now, let's try to answer the question, what is intercultural mediation and how it involves linguistic mediation? I have invited Alina Landowska, an assistant professor from the Department of Cultural Studies at SWPS University, anthropologist and economist, researcher of morality and social change.
In order to approach the intercultural mediation, let me start from the key definition here, which is the definition of culture. By culture, we understand the shared system of values, beliefs, and rules of conduct that shape our behavior in the society. All of us in our contemporary world are exposed to the representatives from other cultures. When we meet each other, we face cultural differences. In order to overcome these barriers, we need to develop intercultural competencies. They foster the intercultural dialogue and the intercultural mediation. By intercultural competence, we understand the ability to handle cross-cultural problems arising from those differences. And by intercultural mediation, we understand the ability to establish social links between people from different cultures. I strongly recommend you the UNESCO Manual for Developing Intercultural Competences, edited by Professor Darla Dierdorf. It explains the concept of intercultural competences. It also illustrates solutions to the problems arising from those cultural differences. And finally, it will provide you with very practical examples from all over the world.
Thank you very much. Now let's go to the practical part of today's workshop. Here is a list of activities that I have prepared for today. Obviously, we won't have time to discuss every activity in detail, but they are all authorial materials targeted at B2 level for secondary school learners. Now, when I was first thinking about the topic for today's practical part, which is a lesson sequence in a logical and coherent order, I recalled some activities my postgraduate students designed last year. They were asked to design model-based modules for secondary school learners for teaching the elements of the language, grammar and vocabulary, with a particular focus on teaching mediation skills and strategies. And one of my students came up with the idea of devoting her module to poetry and to Wisława Szymborska, the 1996 Nobel Prize winner. I thought that this is an excellent idea, and therefore Wisława Szymborska, already mentioned today, will serve as a topic for today's practical part. I have based some of the exercises on the original ideas of my students, but adapted them to the needs of today's workshop, showing you a variety of options and applications so everyone can choose something for himself or herself. So the first task is a screenshot from the Moodle platform, but this is just a forum based on mediation strategies linking to previous knowledge. And the question addressed to learners is, what do you know, what do you remember about Wisława Szymborska from your other classes, from your previous education, from your own research? Now, I thought that it's a good idea to ask students here at this point also about other Polish Nobel Prize winners. Okay, so students upload their answers on the forum. They can see their answers, and this substitutes an offline conversation. Now let's go to collaboration. It's goal-oriented online collaboration, working on Wisława Szymborska's biography. For this activity, I suggest using an interactive timeline, and this is made using Padlet application, but it can be any other, such as Time Toast. Now, I asked learners to look through Szymborska's biography, published on reliable web pages such as Szymborska's Foundation or Nobel Organization, and discuss in group via, for example, online Meet, and put the most important facts from her biography on a timeline. Let me draw your attention that these moments in the timeline are put obviously in a chronological order, but they hyperlink to interactive multimedia-based resources. That enables individualization of teaching that on the one hand reflects students' interests, but at the same time enables adjusting materials by the teacher in the classroom so they serve the learner's needs. You may notice here Cora and Manam, that links to, for example, YouTube video and a wonderful performance of the song Nothing Twice, which is based on Szymborska's poem. The next activities, actually two activities, are based on mediating a text translation. You can also use paraphrasing methods for providing matching content, so words, English and their Polish counterparts, or English counterparts. For another vocabulary-based exercise, my students suggested designing a crossword, and these are two crosswords. One is on the Moodle platform, the other one is on the application puzzle.org. Now we have come to the main text for today's workshop. This is Szymborska's poem Możliwości, translated by Stanisław Barańczak and Claire Kavanagh, the two distinguished translators. And the New York Times Book Review noted that if there were a Nobel-like prize for translators, Szymborska's translators Barańczak and Kavanagh would have been awarded it at once. We can compare these two translations. We can critically evaluate these two translations. Now, when you look at the poem, you will immediately notice, even without going into detail, that it's repetition of the structure I prefer. That's obviously the reason why my student decided to choose this poem for grammar revision and grammar consolidation of the structure I prefer. But it's a natural context, authentic context of this activity. So let's go to the second activity. This is a screenshot from Jamboard, one of the Google applications. And here, learners are asked to compare the text in English against the original in Polish, but the lines are scrambled. So by dragging and dropping them to their proper places, the learner recreates the poem. It can be a group work, but it can be also an individual activity with each student working on each individual screen. The alternative activity may involve listening to someone reading the poem and reordering the lines. The next activity, titled Two Lies and a Truth, again on Jamboard, learners are asked to pick sticky notes, one color per one learner, and to write their own I prefer statements. This is an excellent icebreaker activity, building social skills and rapport in the classroom. Students are asked to write 2 lies and 1 truth, and then they discuss their answers. Later they may guess, ask additional questions, and later they delete lies, and what remains are the truths. Now we can ask learners, we can continue and build this activity into one more, asking them to work on their own individual unique poem based on their own I prefer statements. I read about a similar idea conducted in one of the Polish schools where 6th graders were asked to write a poem in Polish based on Szymborska's possibilities. Another activity, expressing a personal response to creative text forum, used to express our opinion about the poem, whether we identify with certain statements or not. Do we like the poem? Here, voice recording option is highlighted to show us that we can also imitate speaking by using this tool. Now let's go to some extras. Now, Szymborska was known for her unique sense of humor and her visual illustrative talent. She even illustrated a course book, First Steps in English, by Jan Stanisławski. And what you can see are her collages. These are works of art, often postcards, made from cutouts from newspapers, advertisements, and different printed resources. They are put together to tell a new story. And now we are going to do the same collage, a similar collage, but now using words. And for this purpose, we'll use Szymborska's Nobel lecture, okay, to create blackout poetry. But I think that now it's time to introduce Dr. Emma Oki, who will tell us how to create blackout poetry. Dr. Oki is a lecturer at my university, and she's interested in online teaching methods and Asian American visual art.
In this short video, I'm going to show you how to create a blackout poetry activity using Google Slides. So the very first thing you want to do is go to Google Drive and open a new Google Slides presentation. Next, adjust the layout, title and body will do, and then copy the text that you want your students to work with. So here's the title. In our case, it'll be Wisława Szymborska's speech. I'll adjust the size, and then I'll copy the first 2 paragraphs. And once this is ready, rename the title of your presentation, and then download this as a JPEG. Now you actually want to download this, the very first slide, as a JPEG because you'll be using it as the background of the slides that your students will later on work with. It's a good idea to do that because it'll be easier for the students to add lines later on. And this is how you add lines. So at the very top over here. And I'm just going to go ahead and black this out. So first I'll change the color of the line and its thickness so as to make sure that it actually covers everything up. And then you do that as many times as necessary. And this activity usually takes up about 4 or 5 minutes. And soon you'll see the final product. So here is my poem. Okay, say, feel. Talk about poetry, always. Confess, acknowledge, believe in yourself, chat with strangers, write, respond, find, now. And that's it. This is how you create a Black Cup poetry activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aki, for your presentation and instruction. Now, before we go to the last exercise for today, the last activity, just two short exercises on linguistic competence and vocabulary range. We need these exercises to revise vocabulary aimed at expressing emotions. And the first exercise is word wall-based activity, dragging, dropping adjectives to groups, depending whether they express positive or negative emotions. The second activity is based on a Kahoot platform, and it involves using the same vocabulary now in the context. These applications are familiar to teachers. They are very engaging and enjoyed by learners. Now, the final activity for today, mediating a nonverbal text, expressing personal response to creative text. Now, the last activity introduces the late Tomasz Stańko, the famous Polish musician and composer, who was very much inspired by Szymborska's poetry. And he published his last album titled Wisława, recorded with the New York Quartet. And here is an activity based in Google Forms where learners are asked to listen to the piece of music composed and performed by Stańko or watch the video and answer the question, how does it make you feel? Write down your answers using obviously the adjectives from the previous exercises. And finally, it's time for conclusions. To sum up today's workshop, let me say that I have just presented the selected activities, bearing in mind that learners and teachers have different needs and expectations. All of these activities can be conducted in different modes. It can be 100%, they can be 100% used as 100% self-study. They can be used in 100% online mode, in the blended mode, or in a traditional classroom. Authorial materials designed for online usage are suitable for individualization of teaching, are thought-provoking and engaging, and they meet the current technological and educational challenges. Applying the new CFR descriptors, on the other hand, helps both teachers and learners to understand the complex nature of mediation and the corresponding strategies. It activates learning by doing approach, boosts creativity, builds intercultural competence and social skills. Adapting authorial materials to the online mode is not only a necessity, but may also be a benefit of our times. Thank you very much for your attention.